Welcome to our 2017 Shoreline League of Women Voters Luncheon with our guest speaker, New York State Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins. My name is Beth Gradow. I'm a member of the Larchmont Mamaroneck League, and I also chair the Committee on Energy, Agriculture, and the Environment for the New York State League of Women Voters. Thank you to Peggy Jackson, Judy Silverstein, Ann Dooley, and the Orienta Beach Club in connection with today's event. Special thanks to Maria Valenti of Chocolations and the Riley for our chocolate confections. And we've got Xavier and Daphne here from LMC-TV for taping today's event. For those who can't be here, it'll be on LMC-TV in the future. And special thanks to all of you for being here. We welcome our elected officials here today. We have New York State Senator George Latimer, former New York State Senator Susie Oppenheimer, Town of Mamaroneck Supervisor Nancy Seligson, Village of Larchmont Mayor Lorraine Walsh, Village of Larchmont Trustee Carol Miller. I'm sorry, Village of Mamaroneck Mayor. I'm sorry, Norm Rosenblum. Village of Larchmont Trustee Carol Miller. Town of Mamaroneck Council Member Jane Elkine-Heaney. Ryde City Council Member Danielle Taggart-Epstein. And Village of Mamaroneck Judge Christy Derrico. We also have our Larchmont Mamaroneck League coach. Please welcome Sam Mullen, Emily Shen, and George Fuss, who are 3 AP government students at Mamaroneck High School. Future leaders of America. Well, 2016 presidential election certainly gave new meaning to the term global effort. Regardless of party affiliation, we find ourselves as citizens in need of fact-based information to navigate in the context of our current governance. Let's face it, people are stressed out. The simple truths need to guide us, and the League has existed for almost 100 years to empower voters with facts, not hyperbole. An upsurge in membership in the League of Women Voters reflects the staying power of our grassroots, nonpartisan approach to making democracy work. At a time when dark money, corporate lobbyists, governmental inaction, and budget cuts overshadow our politics, giving voice to things that concern the preservation of rights we hold dear has to take center stage. In that spirit, this year's luncheon is dedicated to you. Voter registration and environmental advocacy are current lead priorities at the national and state level. There are American citizens who will cross the ocean to fight for democracy, but inexplicably resist crossing the street to vote in elections. And then there are those who would vote at the drop of a hat, but who have insurmountable roadblocks placed in their path. To that end, the Larchmont Mamaroneck chapter has established a task force whose focus is to improve voter registration and turnout at the local level and advocate for reform at the state level. If you're interested in joining this task force, please write your name on the paper on your table and leave it here, and we will pick it up at the end of today's luncheon. Judy Silverstein, Philip Caskell, and Ann McAndrews will be handling that task force. How many guests here have children? How many have grandchildren? How many have great-grandchildren? Do you rely on the 3 branches of government to protect the environment and the ripple effects to your health? For the past 6+ years as chair of the New York State League's Committee on Energy, Agriculture, and the Environment, and in my law practice, I have observed a state and federal legislature unwilling to pass laws that protect the environment, and an executive branch that has not gone the distance needed unless pressed. Now at the national level, environmental protections are being reversed, and America's commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement hangs in the balance. As co-counsel on a nationally recognized water contamination case from gas drilling, I recently experienced a federal court order a new trial in the face of an 8-person unanimous jury verdict favoring the homeowners. These trends are discouraging. Yet on the flip side, our respective municipalities have environmental committees making strides to improve conditions locally. For environmental impacts coming from beyond our hometowns, we need to keep up the important work here and widen the breadth of citizen influence to address issues that might not be under our noses, but which affect us all the same. For example, I worked with League members and other dedicated citizens for years to bring about the fracking ban. While we don't frack here, the impact still exists. So what's the message? Critical facts don't cease to exist when they are ignored. The key to the cure, as Woody Allen famously observed, is showing up, and then using all available strategies to make change. The good news is we can make change, and it's not as hard as you may think. We can control the momentum, limiting environmental protections by showing up with our consumer dollars, our voices, and our actions. Bottom line, think of shopping as a type of divestiture, a peaceful, practical weapon. Our consumer dollars are mightier than the sword. The more we don't purchase products that harm the environment and our health, the more promptly corporations will have to improve how they produce our food and other products with or without an underfunded EPA and DEC. The chemical and fossil fuel industries wield great power through campaign contributions and lobbying our legislature to limit regulations that would otherwise protect our natural resources, the climate, and our health. Lowering the bar on environmental protections just passes the buck to taxpayer voters to pick up the financial, environmental, and health impact tab. You can level the playing field by communicating regularly with your representatives by providing them with fact-based, verifiable information on topics important to you. Again, that's how we won the fracking ban. To propel voters' ability to participate in preserving our natural resources and addressing climate change, with my research, my love, and input from environmental experts, the New York State League of Women Voters has developed an online educational advocacy resource called Be Earthwise. Be Earthwise provides current practical facts and recommendations addressing ways to use your consumer dollars and actions in a strategic way to preserve the planet for you, our children, and future generations. The current edition of Be Earthwise focuses on livestock agriculture, household cleaners, and the way we deal with our stuff. In addition to preserving the environment and your health, the Earthwise recommendations can save you literally thousands of dollars a year. These issues transcend state lines. Since there is power in numbers, please share the Earthwise with friends and family living across the country, and send your feedback on other issues you want to know more about. The owl logo on the bookmark on your table will take you to Be Earthwise on the New York State League's website at www.lwvny.org. Well, you're eating lunch now, and in the spirit of making democracy work this year, we're going to ask that each table devote a few minutes of your lunch to conversation to identify the major issue you want to see the League address at the local level. And after we resume lunch and before Senator Stewart-Cousins speaks, each table will be asked to tell us in a sentence or two the issue you consider a priority and perhaps how you would like to address it. Understanding your priorities can help our respective league chapters to better fulfill our mission, and there is paper and pencil on the table for you to write down your consensus priorities. So please designate someone at your table to be the spokesperson. I will return in a while. I don't know exactly on the schedule. I just want to mention that I put my good watch on today, and the battery's dead, so I have absolutely no idea what time it is. But we'll be back soon, and to hear from Senator Stewart-Cousins, who will speak to us about politics and political policy issues at the national and state level. Please enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you soon. Before we welcome Senator Stewart-Cousins, I'm going to ask, just go around the room and ask one person from each table just to stand up and tell us in a sentence or two what you consider to be a priority issue that should be addressed by the League, and if you've got a recommendation for how to do it.
Right. We have four priorities, not because I table, not because I was at the table, but voter registration, turnout reform. And Mary made the very good point that what people are looking for is training in how to do that better. So not just, can't just go out. Can't just do it. You've got to be trained to do it right. And then environmental issues, and again, training in how to talk with people about that. and practical advice about that. And then briefly, prison reform and drug issues. And so we will be having a forum on drug issues. So look for that.
Let me mention that Be Earthwise, which I literally spent months putting together, does give you tips on how to communicate. So if you just dig in, you go to lwvny.org and you click on the owl, or it says Earth Day, and there's one icon that says Be Meat Free, one icon says Be Chemical Free, the other icon says Reuse, Repurpose, Recycle, and I promise there is information in there that's different than what you may be typically used to doing. I also want to thank LMC-TV. I do 2 PSAs with the assistance of Dina Schumacher. How about this table over here?
Water management, what to do, fresh water, sewage, all water management, and voter turnout.
Okay, so that's water management, voter turnout. Let me mention that the next Be Earthwise, which will come out in about 6 months, is going to be about water. And people, please send in your thoughts and concerns about that. We know that Assembly member Steve Otis had a lot to do with allocating millions of dollars to help our infrastructure. And obviously there's a lot to be done. And we really ought to applaud our local leaders, Nancy Seligson, Norm Rosenblum, Lorraine Walsh, and the council members for all they're doing for the environment, because I work closely with them and they're doing a great job. The next table, please. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, we were very fortunate. And this is not to send out, don't envy us. We are very fortunate to have George Latimer at our table, because every suggestion, every idea that we came out with, he listened intently, and then he put the reality spin on it. This is what it would cost. So our table was very passionate around the topic of the need for education, as well as promoting, advocating for affordable housing. And we just feel that it's so important to help educate our residents around the county, the state, about what affordable housing really is. It's for our young people who are graduating from college. It's for our policemen, people who are making entry-level salaries, as teachers, as police, as firemen, our civil servants. We need housing. And we also talked about the importance of voter registration, but also voter education, providing workshops and seminars and luncheons that are designed at educating people about what is the importance of voting. What are the consequences if you don't vote? What does that translate into? It translates into a no vote for the person who we would like to see win. And then educating people on the topics and on the issues as well. And then we also kind of very briefly touched on, and George put another reality spin on this. He said, but this is going to cost money. But maybe among a lot of us who are baby boomers and we're retiring and we're looking for a way to reinvest our smarts, our expertise, our intelligence, our experience back into the community for training programs for nonviolent offenders. It's one thing to just drop people back into the community, but it's another thing to say, okay, you're going back, but you've got to go through a transition program first. You've got to acquire some computer skills. You've got to acquire some job training skills, some interviewing skills. And so those were the topics of our discussion.
Thank you, and please, I want to just request everybody, if you give the list, just drop them off at the table before you leave, because this is something that we can all work with. Thank you very much. The table in the back with where Elaine Chapnick is sitting. Hi, Elaine.
I just want to remind everyone, as I was reminded, that you can't get all these things done if people don't come out and vote for the right people to make them happen. So
Good point. Right people to make them happen.
all of our issues relate to voting, as in the League of Women Voters, and they all relate to voting, getting out the vote in non-presidential years, with privacy in voting, extend the voting time, and early voting registration.
Thank you, Elaine. And Randy Rabinowitz's table. Hi, George.
Hi. We talked a lot about environmental issues, so we were thinking a lot about renewable energy, because obviously that's very important. Fixing some sewage issues, and stopping overdevelopment, tearing down like old houses to put up big things. And we were also very concerned about voter registration, like other people have, and especially with the lower turnout elections coming up 2017 and 2018. So we were thinking about what's a way that local government could get involved to try and help register voters. So we thought maybe do some voter drives at the local level to try and increase participation.
Thank you. On the table where Ina is sitting.
We thought you meant environmental issues, so.
That's great. I love that. That's
Protecting the
great.
water supply and supporting renewable energy and its infrastructure. We need new way to transport our energy.
Thank you. Thank you. Ross, table in the back, please.
Well, we have a lot of repeats here. The most important one we thought was getting out the vote and things that did relate to voting, including redistricting, registration, having more registration drives, early voting, and then in addition to that, we had education reform, and one that hasn't been mentioned is mandate relief about the tax cut, particularly tax.
Thank you. Table where Christy is sitting.
Most of the items are very repetitive and not one more important than the other. The first we talked about is the drug epidemic and its threat to society, possibly the greatest threat that we have now. I would also note that the good thing is the New York State in the budget supposedly has allocated $200 million to fight this, as has the county, so that's good. Another one which is very current is immigration status and policies. Westchester County has put out a specific policy which in essence have been cut and pasted by the local municipalities, town of Mamaroneck, village of Mamaroneck, and so on. To that extent, without long visitation, there has been no change in the current policies by the local village and town police departments. Nothing has changed. We are not an arm of the federal government, and we will continue to treat everybody on that level playing field. Another concern is women's productive rights and the threat for a Roe v. Wade and how you should become very active, whether it be voting or not, or just contacting your elected officials. And the second one is, fourth one I should say, which I think is the basis of everything, which is education. Whether it be the schools, you need to be educated to attack all these other programs.
Again, I'm echoing what almost every other table has said. Registration and turnout, getting people out to vote. Also expand early voting possibilities. How can we do that? Because that might actually really do something. Environmental issues, all of us are concerned about, and agricultural and farming practices. And I'll put a word out about flooding because it wouldn't be me if I didn't.
I was going to save this for the end, but please renew your membership. And it's not just the membership, it's participation. We need members, and we can, if people are looking for how to go about doing something, we'll do our best to try to make that happen. But if there are issues that are of concern to you, the great thing about the League is it provides a platform for people to reach out on issues of concern. It's now my great pleasure to tell you about our guest speaker today, Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins. Andrea Stewart-Cousins was raised in New York, and she earned a bachelor's degree from Pace University, teaching credentials in business education from Lehman College, and a master's of public administration degree from Pace University. In 1992, Senator Stewart-Cousins became the first African American to serve as director of community affairs in Yonkers, and she served as a county legislator from 1996 to 2006, eventually serving as vice chair. In 2006, Senator Stewart-Cousins was elected to the state Senate in the 35th District, which includes Greenberg and Scarsdale and parts of New Rochelle, Yonkers, and White Plains. Senator Stewart-Cousins is the leader of the Senate Democrats and the first woman in history to hold a leadership position within the New York State Legislature. During her time in Albany, Senator Stewart-Cousins has sponsored and passed almost 70 pieces of legislation into law, including the landmark Government Reorganization and Citizen Empowerment Act. As Democratic Conference leader, Senator Stewart-Cousins helped lead the fights to establish paid family leave and increase the minimum wage in New York State, and continues to advocate for the protection and expansion of women's reproductive rights, economic growth, and common sense measures to improve the quality of life for all New Yorkers. In response to the results of the 2016 presidential election, Senator Stewart-Cousins was instrumental in laying out a resistance agenda to strengthen New York's democratic institutions and New York's people. She has consistently espoused the values of empathy, empowerment, knowledge, and civic engagement, and has enjoyed success in local and state government by staying true to these values, caring for the underserved, and championing the needs of working families. Please give a warm welcome to New York State Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you? Can I come down?
Yes.
All right, good. I don't like to be up there. It is so great to be here. I was told by my good friend Larry Otis Graham that in accepting this invitation, I was accepting the invitation to an extremely bright, literate, committed, what else did you say? All kinds of stuff. Well connected. People who pay attention, and people who I ought to pay attention to. And when he told me that, I said, Larry, you don't have to convince me. Just tell him where to call. And here I am. So I appreciate being part of your roster. I know my colleague, Senator Latimer, has also been one of your speakers in the past, a great colleague. And I can't, I thank you for bringing me here to see my good friend Susie Oppenheimer, because Susie was a role model for me so long in the Senate, and continues to energize all of us. Even now, she tells me she's even busier, which is hard to believe. But I'm happy to be part. I know that the late Judge Judith Kaye was also one of the speakers here, and so many. So I'm really happy to be part of this tradition. And I was sitting next to Beth, and she's like all fired up. And I said, this was what I came to do. Why are you sitting there all fired up? But we were talking about the League. And we were talking about how important you are. And how when all of us, in whatever level of government we serve, we know that the League is watching. They are egging us on to our highest and best selves. They are taking thoughtful positions on contemporary issues. They are watchdogs. They are informants, informers, and most often, they are right. Right? But the thing is that a lot of times you're just too quiet. The League of Women Voters, with over 100 years of being steadfast in this commitment to women's rights to vote, and be heard has become, I think, a little too comfortable. I think you take a lot of pleasure in doing what you do and being who you are. And because you've done it so long, you're accustomed to doing it in the way you do it. It's time for a change. It's time to shake it up. It's time to elevate. It's time to raise your voice. It's time to be indivisible. You got all these people running around here who got all this energy. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it. They don't know who to do it with. They don't even know why to do it. They're just mad. We go to all of these indivisible meetings, all of my colleagues, right? I mean, group after group, and they're called names. They're all divided because, you know, they're all over the place. So indivisible is quite divisible. But they are newly awakened to why government matters. Aha, didn't you know why government mattered all this time? Didn't you know that the environment that we are living with, the insults to our atmosphere, to our water? Don't you realize that the drug epidemics, that women's reproductive rights, the right to vote, to have your voice heard, don't we realize how incredibly important this is? But nobody seemed to understand until this last election. Nobody seemed to get it. I had people who would say to me, it doesn't matter, my vote doesn't count. And they believed it. You're talking to somebody who won by who lost by 18 votes in 2004, me. After the longest unresolved race in New York State history. In February, they told me I lost. You can't tell me that every vote doesn't count. And those things that we found wrong in our election process, when in the state Senate, I got to be in the majority for only 2 short years, we started working on some of those things. Impediments to voting that people found kept them from being able to cast their vote. For example, I don't know if you realize that in absentee voting, there was a situation where, and it impacts women, you know, a lot, where they registered with their maiden name at 18. 20 years later, they're away, they send in their absentee ballot, they've changed their name. People were able to throw that ballot out. In Irvington, the mayor's race, legal woman voter president, Erin Malloy, was running for mayor of Irvington. She was running against a gentleman. One ballot could decide. And that ballot was the ballot of a woman who had sent in her absentee ballot with her married name. They looked at that ballot. They knew it was her. Just like George, I know it's you. And they said, that name is not your name anymore. Tore it up. Flipped the coin. The guy won. And that was it. That wasn't that long ago. I was able to pass a law, because we were in the majority, with the Assemblywoman Paulin at the time, and we changed that. Something that simple, disenfranchising your neighbor who you know, we're talking about Irvington, a little place. Something like that, disenfranchising somebody. And that is on every single level. And on the state, we are fighting to do the early voting, to do the same-day voting, to do things that will bring people into the fold. But people didn't really care about it that much because they were under the mistaken impression that their vote really doesn't count. Same way in terms of health care. This national discussion about rolling back Obamacare in New York State, had that happen, and they're still talking about it happening, we are talking about $4 billion being pulled out of the coffers of the state. $4 billion. 3 million people losing coverage in New York State. And they're still fighting to do that. Executive orders that want to defund Planned Parenthood. They don't want women to have control of their reproductive health. They don't want, even beyond that, the access that Planned Parenthood gives so many to just ordinary screenings and referrals. That could all go away. And in New York, in progressive New York, where we have a health exchange, I bet you didn't know that, I know that this is the league, we're not partisan, but I am. And you invited me, so you get what you get. I don't have one Republican who would vote to establish the health exchanges. So the health exchanges that people are able to go on to and get their coverage is established in New York, progressive state, by an executive order. Because no Republican voted to have that happen. And in our budget, the money to fund those exchanges are not outlined as funding those exchanges. That's progressive New York. You should know, progressive New Yorkers, that there's not one Republican who today would vote for Roe v. Wade. Not one Republican who will say that the Roe v. Wade 1973, let me tell you that in 1970, New York abortion laws preceded Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade was 1973. And I always remind people that 12 Republicans joined with the majority of Democrats to say that women should have governance over their own bodies and their futures. We know the ability to choose if and when to become pregnant can make all the difference in the outcome, not only for this woman, for her family, for the children. And so 12 Republicans joined with the majority of Democrats. Today, 2017, I don't have one Republican who would say that Roe v. Wade should be codified here in New York. We're in progressive New York. You've got to understand that you have power at your fingertips, in your DNA, that allows for you to sustain the type of energy you have sustained for all of these good issues over the years, moving us forward incrementally. But during this time where there are so many energized, undirected, many women who need to have the guidance, the leadership, the system, the information, the forum, You're it. You're the front line. Don't be here when this action is there. Go there. Get in there. Roll up your sleeve. Be part of these groups. Because they need what you've got. And then you take from them. You take the energy that they have. And all of those ideas that you had that you know maybe doesn't work, draw from them the strength of being brand new and naive in a field that you've been in. Taking their energy, giving your wisdom and know-how will bring us to the next place. And the next place has got to be a place that continues to allow everyone in this room to look at someone like me as the senator. Because I always tell people, and it's a long story, but my parents grew up in a time, my dad was a World War II hero, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, segregated army, came home, segregated. G.I. Bill didn't allow him to buy a home. Banks redlined. We had the project. I grew up in the project. My mother typed 100 words a minute. She couldn't get a job in a corporation because they just didn't hire people like her. Civil service allowed her to climb the ladder, and she became the head secretary in the Corporation Council. The government provided the GIs public housing. My brother and I went to public schools. And when I went into corporate America, because I did that for almost 20 years before I got into government, it was a consent decree that allowed me to move up out of where women were usually marginalized in the phone company into a sales and marketing position. I realized when I got into government, just because I was helping a friend, that this was a place that things could happen for people. The same people who arranged for the systematic discrimination of people in the skin I'm in were the same people who could rectify that situation if they felt that it was important enough. The same people who didn't care how many people died in a drug epidemic in certain communities can change that now. The same people who decided who can be educated, who can come into the country, all of those people decide the same things because of people right here. Voting matters. So whereas I had no role model, no reason to believe that someone like me could be here talking in this beautiful country club to this powerful group of women and men, because of our big ideals, our big dreams, our understanding that people will have to die just like they died to establish women's rights, but people would have to die so that we could continue to give life to dreams we wouldn't even dare to have. That's where we are. And here we are at this moment where at any given time, if we sleep, if we believe we have the luxury of slumber, a bunch of people can decide, game over. That right you had, it's not there. That executive order that was signed, doesn't matter. This whim that I have about what you should do with your life, that's what we're doing. And all of the hard work all of the passion, all of the sacrifice will be lost. Because people in this room, the same people who took a kid like me and allowed me to stand for a challenge for senator against somebody who had been here for decades and so on and so forth and win, that same group of people, if you stay asleep, will allow a backward slide. But that's not you. That's not you. You don't have the luxury of the comfort. You may have trappings of it, but you know you enjoy it here, and then when you get out there, you fight. You fight, you fight, you fight with every fiber in you. You fight for housing, you fight for voting rights, you fight for freedom, you fight for integrity, you fight for people's rights, you fight for the people who are marginalized because they don't have your voice. That's what you do. You fight. You fight for the air and the water. You fight. And every once in a while, generation after generation, we find out that we win. Let's continue to win. Thank you.
We want to take some questions. I'm going to hand the microphone back to Senator Stewart-Cousins. Let me get back to you.
Thank you. So I got to pick? Oh, easy for you. Okay, I was standing here with Mary. Mary said,
How about some tips for how we get into the projects and how we talk to people and where the best place is to use whatever energies we have to communicate?
Mary, I thank you for that. And again, what I'm saying to you is that there are a lot of these groups that are popping up. They're not popping up in the League of Women Voters, but they're popping up all over the place.
Like where?
Like, Indivisible. How many have heard of an Indivisible? Exactly.
How do you get into an individual?
There you go. Okay, so somebody tell Mary how to do it. Because what I'm saying is that all of these people who are out there all excited are not looking for the League of Women Voters. Because they figured out that whatever was happening, it just wasn't working, and that's why we're here. But if you all go into those groups and become part of that fabric, not only will you bring this group into an organized structure that you know can work, but also you'll be energized by their passion. So somebody please find a group for Mary. Larry.
Yes, Senator Stewart-Cousins. Doing the Oprah thing. I wanted to, first of all, I followed your career a long time, from Yonkers to the county legislature, the state senator, and the question that I had, because you were raising some points and giving us a lot of information, like the statistics about who was going to support the fact that there were Republicans willing to get online and support a women's right to choose, but back then, right, but not now. And I worked for Sarah Weddington, who had argued the Roe v. Wade case when I was a White House intern. And what I find striking is that the fact that you are in the position that you're in, and I want to ask you, and if it's the fight from the Yonkers, because that's a rough place to have grown up in the political world, and I know who.
I thought every place was like that.
But my question to you is, what information do people need to have, and what could they have done when you were in the position of being the first woman to be the majority leader? What could voters out in the real world have done other than just letting you fight it out alone in that room with the two other guys?
All right, Larry. Okay, so this is a whole nother life that we're talking about here. First of all, you should know that the makeup of, I know you know that there is the governor, there's the assembly, there's the Senate. And I know that you also know that generally all of these negotiations are 3 men in a room, usually. The governor, the Speaker of the Assembly as well as the Majority Leader of the Senate. They always call 3 men in the room because only men have had those positions. When I was elected 3 years ago, I was elected by the majority of men. You know, I mean, that's kind of why men always, you know, get elected to be these leaders, because we women are still really underrepresented in legislatures all over the country, in government. And in our legislature, there are less than 25% women. So you can understand why men always get elected to these positions. So I always say, and again, Senator Latimer is one of those enlightened men I always appreciate. Yes, right, give him a hand. Who elected me to be the leader. But you know what always happens, and I won't say it always happens, but there's this thing that happens when different people are allowed into the room. It's usually because stuff is really, really hard. You know, it's like, okay, let's try something different. So a lot of times when people who are not traditionally in these roles get an opportunity, it's because people just like are ready to let all voices at the table, you know, that's what happened. So I came in a really, really difficult time. There had already been a defection of Democrats from the Democratic Party caucus, and they called themselves Independent Democrats. And they left in 2011. And part of the reason they said they left was because they didn't like the leadership, they didn't like this, they didn't like that. Part of our retooling our Democratic conference was again changing leadership. We had had some difficult times without question. And so my job was to, you know, rehabilitate our image and to continue to fight in the same way that the League fights for the right thing, assuming the right thing would happen. When there was an opportunity for Democrats to take the majority numerically, those Democrats in 2012 decided to align themselves with the Republicans. So instead of having the power that the majority would normally afford the Democrats, we didn't have it because of the alignment that they had with the Republicans, and that continues to this day. So now it's been 7 years of this small group of Democrats who decide, usually with the Republicans, how to move us forward. So a lot of the good things that we're talking about seeing don't ever get to the floor because it depends on who is in charge, what policies actually get to the floor. And if you are aligned with somebody who thinks that their policy is great, and I said, generally, you know, we understand bipartisanship. We can all agree to put, you know, an oak tree on Oak Street. That's not hard. Right? I mean, I guess you'll find somebody will say, oh no, why? You know, why would we put something different? People expect an oak tree. But the reality is that we can do that usually. But parties do really have philosophical differences. So if you align yourself with somebody who you know disagrees with you all the time and allows them to set the policy, and then in turn they give you a bigger office, some more perks, chairmanship, and then it becomes this kind of symbiotic relationship. And oh, every time I threaten you and say, well, I won't give you the power if you don't do a little bit something, then you move a little bit something so that everybody can applaud and say, oh, well, see? I made them do something progressive, see? We're not so bad. It is a very difficult situation. So what I've tried to do is realign Democrats to work together. I think it makes sense, especially in this era, when there are so many things, if we who believe in certain things actually got together and assumed the majority, which I will have once again in May, and really put our policy initiatives forward, I know New Yorkers would have a really more reflective government, not only of our broad demographic differences, but of what the majority of people have elected people to come and do. So what can people do? A lot of people didn't know there was an IDC. People thought that this government in New York State was working just the way everybody else's is. It is not. And the interesting thing about it is that Republicans, obviously we know on a national level, have the presidency, have the Senate, have the House, have the Supreme Court. They also control 33 state legislatures. They paid attention to where the talent comes from. Here in New York, where we could be, because the Democrats haven't paid so much attention, so there's only about 5 of these legislative branches that are controlled by Democrats. New York could be number 6, but again, the Republicans have figured out how, even when they don't have the numerical majority, how they can entice people to come and allow them to continue to be empowered. I don't think it's a good idea for democracy. I've always said that I think that you should really, if you're running on a line, you should, when you get there, be with the partner that brought you. People don't expect you to come and affiliate with the opposite team once they voted for you on a certain line. And I also say if that was such a good idea, then I thought that Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand would be sitting with Mitch McConnell today. They are not, because of the principles that people expect them to represent when they are sent there by their hard-earned vote. And although your team may not always win, the thing to do is stay there and make your team stronger. So that's the thing. I think people being aware that there is an IDC, people paying attention to New York State, people paying attention, and that's the other thing with these different groups. They align themselves around issues. So some people really, really care about electoral policy. Some people are just really interested in the environment, or they're just really interested in criminal justice reform. There are these silos for your interests, but all of these interests always lead to what is the policy position, who has that policy position, who's standing in the way of that policy position, and how do we make enough noise to make that policy position change. You got the power for that.
Stay all afternoon, but we're running out of time. Senator Stewart-Cousins, before you sit down, you're well known for your powerful speaking, and we've been blessed by that today. And you're also well known for your trademark scarves. And so, if I may, on behalf of the League, we've got one that we hope that you will wear to the Senate, and think of us when you do. Thank you so much. Just have a few announcements to make. Let me put my glasses on so I can actually read the announcements. This weekend, of course, is Earth Day, and there are going to be events going on all over the county. Please check the websites, Village of Larchmont, Village of Mamaroneck, Rybrook. We've got very active environmental committees. In White Plains, there's something going on, so please check on that. I think that Sheldrake has something going on as well. On May 9th, at 7:30 at Mamaroneck High School, Pace's Auditorium, the League of Women Voters will co-sponsor with the Larchmont Mamaroneck Radar, Mayor Rosenblum's Drug Committee, the Summit, and the Mamaroneck Schools an important free program open to the public to navigate the potentially fatal world of drugs. Speakers include parenting and drug expert Mike Nerney, the former director of the National Drug Research Institute, and a first-hand account by a parent. We are in the planning stages for the 2018 Larchmont Mamaroneck One Book, One Community series, which will revolve around the book 1968, The Year That Rocked the World by Mark Kurlansky. I think most of us will remember that 1968 was the year of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but also was the year that Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy were assassinated. There were riots in the DNC convention in Chicago, anti-war movement, Black Power, Generation Gap, and so much more, including the women's movement. The book 1968 brings to life the culture and politics of that year and shows how 12 volatile months transformed who we were as people and led us to where we are today. The League will be participating. We have director Susan Riley and is Laura, hi Laura, and Laura Eckley from our two libraries, Larchmont and Mamaroneck. If you want to hold a program, please see them, or I can get you the information afterward. It's a great way to bring our community together. Let me see what else we have here. I'd like to hand this over to our RIDE president. Did you have an announcement that you wanted to make?
No, I think actually Senator Cousins did a very good job.
And so do we think so too. Okay. Are there any other announcements that anybody wishes to make? Yeah.
Thanks. The River Towns League of Women Voters is having a Hot Topics breakfast on May 9th at the Doubletree Hotel in Tarrytown. You're all invited, and you should all be getting an email. Should have gotten an email on that. And Sandy Galiff, the former league president and assemblywoman, is going to do a forum on an election law. I know there was a wonderful one that White Privates did the other night. There's going to be another one at the Greenberg Library on May 13th, so watch for those events.
Oh, okay. So yes, we need a little drum roll here. Okay. There we go. Yes, let's have Senator Stewart-Cousins. We're going to pick the lottery winner here.
I have to say, everybody's a winner.
Do we have the accounting firm of Ernst & Young?
That's right.
Jenny Greer, congratulations. You're welcome to stay and chat if you wish. We're so grateful for all of you being here. Thank you for your membership, and safe travels. Take care.